the Unconsumed podcast. I'm Lee Corning. I'm here with my good friend Tyler Baker. Tyler and I have known each other for a long time. We actually went to college together, played on the same college basketball team. And this is actually the first time we're doing the podcast in the morning. So it's the crack of dawn. The sun isn't even out yet. Every other podcast we do is done after hours. So the sun's not out, but it's on the other side of the earth right now. So Tyler, thanks for coming on and making time for this early in the morning. Appreciate having you on.
Of course, man. Happy to be on.
So Tyler, you and I have worked out on a million different things. And, I kind of told a little bit of the story of some of those things in episode 15, if you want to check that out. But the thing that I'd love to have you on for is you and I came from the same place. And when I met you, you didn't necessarily have all of the what the world would consider pre-existing conditions to go and be an entrepreneur and be someone that can go run these lean startups. So first, I'd love to have you tell us a little bit about your history and what you've done, and then just the bullet point addition, and then we'll dig into those things and we'll kind of see what makes sense to talk about further.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I guess looking back on history, you're right. Like anyone who's played college athletics, most of what you do is, even in your formidable years, like growing up in high school and into college, you're just playing sports. And I went to a small Christian school in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Loved the people there. Awesome people, great family. Education was, it was okay. Let's just say I wasn't, the first pick for Brown or Dartmouth. I was, I got probably 3.5 in high school, and college wasn't considered a place where I'm going to go set myself up for a future career. College was a place I was going to go play basketball. And so. Right.
I guess a caveat to this story is that you're 6'8", 6'9", and there was I don't remember the exact stat, but you were ranked as one of the best high school basketball players in either West Coast or country, something like that.
Well, definitely in New Mexico, but that's not saying a whole lot. Everyone else is a little shorter, but I had some decent mid-major offers coming out of high school, and unfortunately injuries throughout college.
Yeah, well, I was there for that. And I'll tell you what, it's kind of astonishing to me how anyone makes it through college athletics in Division I without taking a ton of injuries, because it's pretty grueling. So you were in high school, Albuquerque, went to college in Virginia. And when did it I guess I cut you off on the bullet points on what your companies have been, what you've done in the meantime or after the college experience.
Yeah. I mean, the quick version of the bullet points was, just transitioning into college. The main focus was basketball, majored in business. Coming out of college, I really was, my college career was injury plagued, and I wanted to go figure out a way to be successful in business so that I could then get back that elite status and feeling of I'm somebody, kind of like I was coming up through high school. And so naturally, being a 22-year-old, the way I thought about that was, let's go make money. So, I just went and Google search financial services, Lynchburg, Virginia, where I was living, called the first place I saw, which was the Northwestern Mutual ad, got an internship there. And then that kind of started my working career. Moonlighted some other ideas, which the first one turned into TeamSynced, which, you're familiar with. And then we did another project called Onit, which I'm operating now. And so
thank you for your podcast sponsorship, by the way.
So, the very short, I guess, framing of this is you work a job. We call this plan A, plan B, but you work a job and you do your best there and you learn. And then your nights and weekends and all in between, you're learning how to, get something off the ground through bootstraps, what it's called, just not taking investment dollars, but just putting a lot of sweat equity into something and seeing if you can make it work.
Yeah. So you have shocked me in a lot of ways by, being the guy I remember in college. And then, you and I were in the same frame of life where we were trying to figure out the career thing early, but then you won at the career thing, and then you turn around and won in the entrepreneurial arena as well. Tell me how you went and you got the jobs and you got to the places you wanted to be, and then you flipped it and you said, no, I would rather do TeamSynced than Onit.
Well, I think the first thing is anytime you're going to have success with anything, you got to put a lot of people around you to help. You were one of those people for me. on the career side, you were a little further down the track in your career. And so getting into software sales and just kind of having an entry point through a warm contact is always helpful to get your foot in the door. Once you're in the door, obviously you want to put your head down, work hard, and see what you can make of it. So, I think also just to kind of backdrop what you said, like to caveat success, I don't really feel like I've achieved success. And I think that's also maybe an attribute of others, that you kind of always feel like the goalposts are moving. And so,
well, they are, just FYI.
Yeah, they really are. And so success is relative, and you obviously try to process that through what is success? What does that mean for me? It changes over time. The goalposts get bigger or move back further. But, surrounding yourself with successful people, you helped me get going with obviously my start in software sales, enterprise software sales. And then in the backdrop, I think everyone needs a chip. Like I had a big chip, like I mentioned, maybe not the most ideal chip, not something I would want to drive my motivations for my entire life, but it was really just to kind of prove myself in this new arena. Mm-hmm. And so that's what really drove a lot of the work, and not all of it, but a lot of the work early on to get TeamSynced, which was, if you didn't watch episode 15 or you're not familiar, TeamSynced is just a scheduling communication platform. It's kind of like an operations communications platform for college athletic teams, mm-hmm. which turned into departments. And so building that app, building that software company with co-founder Tim Lair early on, it was probably about 3 years we put into that alongside our jobs before we finally stopped working to go full time on that venture.
Yeah. So can you outline the structure with as much detail of how the TeamSynced adventure went? Because it started out as, you guys built this app. I kind of came in later. Some other folks kind of came in later, but you guys built that from nothing on your own. And then, like there came a time when you realized, like, oh my gosh, this is going to work. Can you tell me about that time forward?
Sure. Well, let's see here. When we first started TeamSynced, we just wanted to make something that worked. We were just thinking like, let's build something someone will buy. And that was the goal. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the best practices around startups and around how to bootstrap something to profitability or to an exit, it really wasn't in our framework of thinking. We were just two guys that were like very hungry to make something work. And so we started trying to do a few other projects. 411er was this idea where we were going to basically build like this event site for colleges around Lynchburg, Central Virginia area to log on, see what's happening. And it was just a dumb idea. It failed. But iterating through dumb ideas and then finding something that you're familiar with, generally a problem you're familiar with, is a really good place to start. And that's where we started. We found a problem with our college basketball team. We solved that problem through the first iteration of TeamSynced, and we got Liberty University men's basketball, our alma mater, to buy it, because mm-hmm. we basically like called up a friend, was like, hey, will you buy this? And he's like, well, does it kind of work? We're like, yeah, it kind of works. And so he bought it. And then from there, Tim developed quickly. I went and hustled and kind of built the basis for TeamSynced back in 2013. And we started picking off these basketball teams through a warm network. And so that's the genesis of TeamSynced. And then you fast forward to 2014, 2015, we scaled to about 350 teams, some departments. We had NBA teams on there. And all throughout that process, just a quick version is just, we kind of just learned and grew in stages. And as long as we had traction, as long as we had another customer, another feature request, just more traction, you kind of sniff that out, then you just keep going, it's exciting. And you're just faced with all these problems that once you solve them, it creates a learning opportunity, and then your perspective grows. Right.
So one of the things I think is lost on I guess our age and a little bit younger, maybe a little bit older too, and I'm not, I see a lot less of the older folks doing this, is the iteration through all the failed ideas. So like you mentioned 411er. I haven't heard that since, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago now, something like that, 5 years ago now. Yeah. And there was other ones too, but it's like you executed on all of them at full energy and full capacity, and then still they didn't work. And that can be like a really discouraging moment for a lot of people. So how would you describe how to bust through that? Is it the chip, or was it just like you being like, I've got to do something. I've got to regain my status as someone on the earth. So like, was that it?
Well, for me personally, I think it's different for different people. So first of all, like my advice to answer your first part of your question is when you start something new, generally at the first bit of it, there's like this dopamine release in your mind because it's a creative idea. You're excited about it. You're normally drinking coffee. You're talking with a friend and you're like, we're going to revolutionize this. It's going to be amazing. And then the first thing you do is you go Google search to see if anyone else is doing it. And then you find like there's like 100 people doing it. And you're like, oh my gosh, how do I beat those guys? And it kind of begins a journey. Any good idea, any spark of creativity, whether you're solving a problem or creating an opportunity, begins this journey. And then it's just kind of like, you have to ask yourself like, why am I doing this? Is it for money? Great. If it's a feasible idea to make some extra money? Great. Like go solve that problem. Is it, I want to do something for the rest of my life. I want to build this amazing company. I really believe in this product market fit. If we can get there, I love it. Then you start. And really, I think everyone's motivation, the underpinning motivation is what fizzles out or enables them to get through all these checkpoints along an entrepreneur's journey. The second part of your question for me, it was early on, it's kind of hard to remember, honestly, like going back to those days. I remember
driving home. Sense, yeah.
Yeah, but I think for me, it was just like my athletic background has taught me, and even just battling through injuries has taught me like, hey, if there's work to be done, and I can do it, and I can get some traction, some sort of improvement, then I can pretty much put myself through a lot of pain to get there. Mm-hmm. And I think that resilience or that work ethic is one of the benefits that athletes have, or anyone that's gone through hard things has it within them to kind of, work out that motivation, that underpinning motivation. So those two in combination.
So there's two things that pop there to me. Is one, like you're trying to decide what ideas will work and what won't work. And this is educated by having done it a few times. So is there a book or a checklist that you can rattle off real quick that would say like, if your idea does these three things, then it has a product market fit, it's viable, it's doable, it's executable, it's not going to be cost invasive for me to get into, that kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, I would say like in terms of factors or some filters for ideas, number one is, are you really familiar with the problem, the domain problem? And can you solve this problem well? And then I think if you're really familiar with the problem, you feel like it needs solved, and then you have to kind of step back and just look at the economics, unit economics, or just like the financial picture. Like if we solve it, can we capture value in the form of, profit that would fund this business? Or is there some sort of horizon on a map that we can plot, like within this range of a time horizon, we can expect a return? So if you're familiar with the problem, the economics work. And then I think the third thing is just like, do you want to do it? What's the opportunity cost of pursuing it? Every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to a lot of other things. And I think that's also something that if you don't count the cost ahead of time, you can just not really understand the opportunity cost of getting into a venture and having a lot vested in it, and then getting to these crossroads down the road where you're like, oh man, I can't quit this because I put so much into it, but like all these other opportunities are passing us by. Yeah.
So, and that brings up my second thing, which is a lot of times when you send an idea, so first thing guys do is they sit down and they brainstorm ideas. There's a whole laundry list of them, and then you got to apply those filters, because if you chase all those rabbits, you won't catch any rabbits. Yeah. And then the other piece is, once you have an idea and it fits all those things for you, there will almost definitely be someone else doing the same thing. So can you talk to what you think are the criteria that say, okay, so someone else is doing this, but my differentiation is something I think can win in this market?
Yeah, sure.
There was competitors in TeamSynced and lightly in the Onit space.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I learned, and just to preface, I guess, let me step back. Like my introduction of kind of the brief history of my working career is a little vague. Like for anyone who's not familiar with TeamSynced or even Onit, these are like very niche SaaS applications, web mobile apps that service problems in the sports world. In TeamSynced, fortunately, we worked on it for 3 years. It was acquired by Teamworks.com, which is the leading collaboration platform in college athletics, in pro athletics. They're growing rapidly. So they acquired us back in 2016. We worked with them for a year, and I learned a lot through that process. So that was kind of my first entry into just tech and entrepreneurship, building a company that could sustain my standard of living and then some. And then, of course, when you have a successful acquisition, there's in the liquidity event, then you can kind of reap a lot of those benefits in terms of just like monetary or whatever. So by and large, I am not someone that has started, a company that's global and, we have 500 employees. Everything that I'm speaking from comes from the perspective of, building small teams, building applications that fit niche problems. And so, and specifically in the sports world. So that's kind of been my history. And I think that's important just so.
Yeah, I'm going to chalk that up as my fault because it's too early in the morning.
That's all good. I mean, I'm staring at a Logitech webcam, pretending it's you, trying to make sure my eyes are right. So it's all good.
Yeah. So I appreciate that. And so to get back to what I was saying there is you very specifically, you fit that sports niche, and it's it's fit niches that we didn't even really think we would get into, which is like pro basketball got into this. Neither of us did that. Yeah. Pro baseball got into this. Yeah. Neither of us did that. So how do you expand outside of the narrow expertise? Because like I said, college basketball was the start of this, but that has expanded into other areas because of the core competence of the original, I guess, venture.
Yeah, certainly. And so I'll combine that answer with your question about the competition. So competition is a good thing. Many people will say this in terms of if there's competition, that's great. There's a market for what your idea is or what you're familiar with, going back to being familiar with the problem, going back to having, the wherewithal to eventually get good economics out of the situation and then the passion to go solve that problem. So if there's competition, it's good to learn from them. There's all kinds of different ways to look at it, like first mover advantage, or you kind of be a fast follow and differentiate. So competition can be good. It's an indicator that there's a market for what your idea is.
Yeah. One thing I'd mention in that is it's just as dangerous to walk into an uncreated market because you have to create the market.
Big time.
That's a whole new set of skills. That's a whole new set of costs. So something to be thinking of when you're working on your own ideas.
Absolutely. I mean, there's this blue ocean strategy. You can Google it and read about it, but it's just this idea that you want to go into waters where they're not red. They're not shark infested waters where there's just no margin, no way to create any type of mode or traction in your business. So I think there's a balance there. It's like competition is an indicator, and you just have to kind of process what competition is in any situation. And then kind of from there, go and see how you want to handle it. And I've been in both situations where you kind of run into competitors and you're battling deal after deal. We do this in the enterprise software world all the time. And, you can speak to that and complex sales cycles and large deals. But in the sports tech industry, I've also been in some situations with the latest application Onit where the thing we built didn't exist. And so now you're having to teach and create value in the minds of customers. But once you do, then you're in a position of advantage. They may not know about it, but if you get their attention and communicate it, and you get contracts in place and value in place, then you can protect it. And being the first mover is a wonderful place to be in many situations.
Yeah, that's an interesting dichotomy because in college athletics, there's obviously way more college athletics teams than there are pro baseball teams. So if you're a first mover in a very small pond and then you get that traction, it can be all yours. We were talking with angel investor and founder of Rev.com, Jason Chicola, last week, and he was mentioning I like to get into and invest in situations where there's a winner take all mentality. Okay. So Onit fits that perfectly. TeamSynced, I think it would be harder to tell that story, but it worked anyway. So it's there's no real filter on I'm saying a lot, and that's bugging me. There's no real filter on what will work and what won't work until you actually try it. And so that's why I think the iteration process is so important. It's to try all those ideas out and then see if they're viable and then put them through your filters, bounce them off friends, see if this would actually work, and then figure it out as you go. The last thing I wanted to touch on before we kind of move forward is can you show me what it's like to to go through company acquisition. So TeamSynced grew very quickly over the course of about 3 years. That was a very cool journey to be on. If I can give you guys one thing in life that I think you should try to figure out, is try to get to a place where you love working with the people you're working on and working on the project you're on. There was a time I was a trader, and I remember going into the office, and the trading markets were closed because it was President's Day, and I was so furious about that. And that's one of the last times I remember being like really bummed out that it wasn't work time. And that time at TeamSynced was that for me in a lot of ways. So can you tell the story about what the acquisition part is like? Because you've built this beast, and it's rocking and rolling. You've created a blue ocean strategy in a lot of ways, where you're in the waters, you're the only one. And what's it like to take it from someone calls you, says they have interest, to actually going to fruition on that? Because that's everyone's dream, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in the case with us specifically, it wasn't so much a blue ocean strategy, or
right.
Our competitor called us. So it was like kind of the opposite. There wasn't a lot of people in the space. We were the first two. They were the first, and we kind of came behind with a similar idea. Unbeknownst to us, they existed. And so, the first time your competitor calls you and they're bigger and they have, they've been around longer, you're a little gun shy, and you want to play slow. But I think, contextually, we had like 350 customers. We're growing. We left really good jobs to kind of grow our startup. We're building a small team here in Charlotte, and then we get this call, and they're kind of like, hey, let's talk, come to our offices, up in Durham, and let's just like learn, let's get to know each other a little bit more. And quickly you kind of feel out the type of people they are. And you can, just like any relationship, I would say, like, you kind of can come to the table and quickly, after you get to know someone, understand their motives and understand like how they see the world and how they see your business, and kind of just align, like, are we even close in our initial value of the situation? And if you're not close on the initial value of a situation, like, you can go through due diligence and you can have all these negotiations. It's just not going to work, because there's just too much field to make up. There's too much margin to make up. And in this case, much of it worked out. The team works. Zach Maritas, their founder, he's a really, really just honest guy, really great guy. Shot us straight. He's really passionate about his business, and that trust and the fact that we did see a lot of things similarly just ultimately led to our decision. And so I'll be honest, like, you're reading through 3, 4, 5 emails, and you're reading through the same email that you write and changing it 3, 4, 5, 10 times, like looking to like carve out any angle of value you can and protect. And
that might just be you, though, because that's your personality.
Yeah. And I had some help. I mean, I was like, I would write the email, and then like, Chad Kazel, who would go behind me and like revise it and be like, no, you're being soft here, you need to like strengthen up here. But like all that thought into like financial analysis, writing emails, thinking about every conversation. I mean, treating the whole situation delicately is the first time we've ever gone through that. It's a big deal. And you learn every step of the way. You're careful every step of the way. But in hindsight, you're kind of like, it's all common sense. It's like, it's going to work because people see value similarly, or it's just not. I mean, that's the short of it.
So brass tacks a little bit. So this podcast is all about people that aren't familiar with certain things, and they can come on here and learn the directions to go on certain things. One of the things that pops up to me quite often is people say the word due diligence. They talk about code review. They talk about legal review, all of the things that would be speed bumps in the exit for a small company. Can you tell us about those things? What is that like? Just for context, because people are working on something, they're trying to get a picture of the full road. Can you define that at all?
Yeah, sure. So I guess starting with the concept of due diligence, and in our situation, and if you have a business or you have a project you're working on, and your goal is a liquidity event, you want to be acquired, I think the best thing to do, or the best way to define due diligence, is once a letter of intent signed, which is basically a document stating like both parties are very interested and want to proceed with the transaction. But now the acquiring party, the party that's going to put up money, that's pretty straightforward. Or some form of compensation, usually money and owner equity and other metrics, but that's pretty straightforward. Now they want to know what they're getting. And so they start diving into all the, the closets and corners of your business, trying to understand, like, where's their risk? Where are there things that we need to, incorporate into our strategy, et cetera. They have a lot of questions. So this is where they look into your business. And that's what due diligence is. I mean, really, it's just a long checklist of all these items that they're going to need answers to, questions they need answers to. So one of the things you can remember as you're building your software company or building your business is do things the right way. Document your code would be an example. Make sure your security is up to code. Make sure you have insurance. Make sure your contracts, if you have a standard contract and then you deviate away from that for certain deals, make sure that's organized and filed, because due diligence is going to go say, hey, give me all the contracts that aren't your standard form contract. I need to read through them. What provisions did you put in there that would potentially, put us at risk, or, go against some sort of partnership agreement we have with one of our partners. And so they'll need to get into all that. So staying organized, documenting things, as you go through the process is a lot easier than doing it all, pulling all-nighters, a week before you're supposed to be in some meeting to try to get all these questions answered for the potential acquirer.
Yeah. One thing you didn't mention that I've noticed to be extremely important is the accounting. All of the accounting software, all of those records have to be kept. And
Sure.
that was the only thing I would add there. But
Absolutely.
I think about the things that people have in their brain when they talk about, maybe this is like Hollywood culture displaying itself in entrepreneurship, is you have this idea, it's $1 billion idea, and then it just kind of materializes overnight. It was all very easy. Someone shows up in a big boxy jacket and they give you a check and it's $1 million and he says, we're going to buy you. That has never, ever happened. So I just want that to be clear. And having been through this and likely we'll go through it again, can you take the picture that's painted for us versus the reality? Like, tell us about the difference of those two things.
Yeah. Well, earlier in the podcast, you asked about like resources that people could kind of read, or what do I read, or where are some things, that was part of one of the questions. And Eric Rice's Lean Startup was a book that was really impactful to me. Mm-hmm. And, that book, The Lean Startup, really just, I think unpacks a lot of just the real nitty gritty lessons of like doing a startup. And so to speak to your most recent question, I think, it really, you answered, it's like, that's never been the case. And so whenever you start something, you start solving these problems, you quickly realize how much goes into building traction and building value in the form of a business. And so, certainly certain ideas are better than others, no question. Instagram, I think, had 13 employees when they sold to Facebook for billions of dollars. And so, the revenue per employee there was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just there's different inputs that go into different types of ideas. And, so all businesses are definitely not equal. Certain ideas are better and certain ideas are more likely to be acquired. But I think the lesson is, well, what's feasible for me?
Right.
A lot of people want to find a shortcut to money, and that's normal. I did too. What's feasible to make the most money quickly? Where can I get clever? Where can I get creative? What tactic can I employ in this world that would allow me to build something and get paid for it? And I think those are entrepreneurial instincts in all of us. However, going back to those three factors of like what actually would sustain a successful effort, you have to solve problems in this world or create amazing opportunities as table stakes for a business.
Yeah.
So that's one. And then just for the sake of repetition, you also need to be able to like persevere and have like internal motivation to like carry out a plan with good economics to go accomplish solving that pain or creating opportunity for somebody.
Yeah, I love that. So we're spinning on an axis here, and I want to make sure that we get plenty of time to talk about Onit, which is, so you have this exit with TeamSynced, and Onit spins up shortly thereafter. Can you tell us about how that went?
Sure. And this is kind of like, I didn't get to answer your question about like, you start with one group of people you're solving a problem for, but we didn't know about NBA. We didn't know about college football. We didn't know about departments. Like, how do you get there? Well, Onit's a perfect example. You learn from your customers. I mean, business to business, especially, it's very easy to learn what your customers want. You call them up and you ask them, hey, do you want this? And they're like, no, we want this. Great. Call up 3 or 4 other customers. Do you want this too? They're like, yeah. All right, we got a feature. Like, let's build it and let's sell it to them. It's pretty straightforward, a little different with consumer-facing applications, but that's how Onit came about. A guy named Brian Kraft hit our TeamSynced inbound, just like wanted to learn more about TeamSynced to solve a problem he had. He's a scout for the Miami Marlins. And I was, I get all kinds of emails coming through, investors, whatever. And I can kind of quickly understand if it's a sales opportunity or not. Well, in this case, I was like, I really didn't want to set up a meeting. I was really busy time of year. But I was like, one of my policies is like, take a meeting. Just take a meeting with everyone you can and learn. So I took the meeting, hop on a WebEx with him, show him TeamSynced. I'm asking him questions about the problem, doing discovery. And I know this isn't going to solve his problem.
Right.
And he's really bullish on having his problem solved. So I was like, okay, I'll give you a login. You can have a demo account and see what you can make of it, whatever.
Right.
We'll cancel it in a couple of weeks. Well, like a day later, he has a 42-page PowerPoint with all these markups on TeamSynced, with arrows drawn of changes we need to make and move this here, move that there, add this, and then we could solve this problem. And I'm like, goodness gracious. I mean, he put me on a WebEx within a few days and took me through his plan of how we need to change our app to solve this problem.
Right.
So I was like, this guy's passionate about solving a problem. Bingo. One of the 3 things, right? What's a problem that needs solved? So doing more looking into that, eventually that birthed a new application called Onit. And don't ask me why Tim and I decided to start something else amidst trying to grow TeamSynced. I wouldn't advise that for anyone. Luckily for us, it worked out. We're just too ambitious at the time.
Right.
So yeah, that's the genesis of Onit. We built it for the Miami Marlins scouting department. And then before year's end, we had the Kansas City Royals, Boston Red Sox. And now we have, over 2/3 of the MLB using our platform. We built out system integration capabilities, more video features, and we're kind of a point solution turned into just like a holistic partner for many of the MLB scouting departments. And activity breeds activity. Had we never started 411er, we never would have started TeamSynced, which never would have led to Brian, which never would have led to Onit. And all the lessons and things we've learned along the way from customers and experience in solving problems will kind of flow over into the next thing, and knowledge compounds. So
yes,
that's the main lesson there.
So you've been an entrepreneur in the purest sense for, I guess, since the time you left Tableau. So that would be, what's that, 4 or 5 years now?
Yeah.
And you've had one successful exit, one that could be successful in an exit if you wanted to go that route. What is next for Tyler Baker Enterprises?
Yeah. So that question tripped me up for like the last year, and it still does a little bit.
One thing I gotta mention to the viewer is Tyler will take an idea that I would make a snap decision on and then ruminate on it for months, coming to the perfect answer. So I'm interested to hear this in a podcast version myself.
Well,
you've been outed.
I would say, fortunately for me, like Tim Lair, my business partner, co-founder of TeamSynced, co-founder of Onit, has been like extremely just good fit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm remiss not to mention like all this perceived success, and some of the legit success we've had. It's not all on my shoulders by any means. Like I think it's very rare you have one guy that can just do it all, especially with software companies.
Yes.
You got to have a hustler and a hacker, however you want to throw it out there. And Tim is largely, minimum half responsible for all the success we've had. And
well, I think it's, one of the main things to mention about Tim is that Tim writes all the code for these things.
Yeah.
Right.
Big time.
So it's the technical co-founder masterpiece that you've kind of pieced together. And that, like you said, works very well.
For sure. And, in addition to just writing the code, it's like you need people around you. You've been this for me. Tim's also this for me. I'm that for him, in terms of people to just run your ideas through. Most of the time, I think entrepreneurs, especially when you start trying to do things that were more risk with bigger impact in the world, those two things go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. Lately and really the last year, this has been something, your head's down and you're like working in the business, just working away on your computer, getting deals. you're working in the business, in the business, in the business. Occasionally you come up for air, you work on the business. Maybe someone wants to acquire you. Maybe you want to raise some money, you know, and even raising money is kind of working in the business, but strategically, like thinking about your life and then
right.
company. When you're doing a job and you're running a lean startup on the side, there isn't a lot of time for like abstract philosophical questioning and answering. You're just like abstraction and you're going. And
right.
when you know, this is the first time I've been through this where you don't work anymore. You sell one of the companies, all of a sudden you have all this time and you've learned a lot. Now you're trying to process it through like your question, what's coming into the future. And I think most people want to marry like what's feasible with what they consider to be ideals that lead to happiness for them. And I think that combination is like very complex, and it gets into more philosophical and like faith-based kind of decision making. But for business, I see us trying to go, you know, we're currently working on something new that is hopefully going to have a large impact in some areas with the people that we're passionate about, which is former college athletes, former pro athletes, and just the athletics in general. I think there's just a lot of misconceptions around like the good it does for people and the purpose of it, going back to like 7, 8-year-olds all the way through high school and even into college. There's real people that spend the majority of their lives improving on a sport, and that transition into real life is a rocky one. And, you know, I just think there's a lot of inefficiencies that can be made efficient in just kind of the lives of athletes. And so we're gonna be working on something related to that.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's something that I think is really interesting. You might not want to say much about it right now, so I won't put you on the spot, but I think there will be some very cool things coming from your camp.
Well, I would totally say it. The thoughts aren't structured properly. So I tend to be long-winded anyway. I'm not going to get into that mess. Otherwise, we'll be here a little too long.
Gotcha. Well, so is there anything that you would, because like I said, I say this quite often, is 79% of the viewership of our podcast is between the age of 24 and 35. And those are people that are trying to figure out like how to get going in their careers. They're trying to figure out, you know, hey, I'm good at these two things. How can I couple them together? How can I make this into something? If you were giving advice to yourself, I mean, how old are you now? You're going to be almost 30, right?
Yep.
Oh boy. What advice would you give to 22-year-old Tyler Baker now that you've gone down the track a little bit?
Good question. Really good question. I think the best article I've ever read, just starting with something tactical, is Pick a Career That Actually Fits You by Tim Urban. It's at waitbutwhy.com.
Say that again. Wait, but why?
Yeah, waitbutwhy.com. His name's Tim Urban, really interesting thinker, but he has a career. It's probably the first one on his homepage right now, or an article on his homepage called Pick a Career That Actually Fits You. It's a really long read. Like, take a day off of work and go through it. It's not easy, right? Because choosing, like, what is a career that actually works for me? Like, what am I passionate about? Should I follow my passion, or should I just go get a job that pays well and become passionate about it? Like, there's lots of different ideas around like what people should do. And I think that article gives you a framework for figuring that out, but it's painful. It's hard.
Can you outline it for us? For someone to go watch a YouTube video and then go read a day-long article, you got to hit me with some.
Well, this goes to my advice. If you're 22 to 24, even just early in your career, and you're trying to find something that's like awesome, be prepared to work for it. Like, it isn't going to be convenient. If convenience is what you're seeking, or if that's like the minimum amount of work you're willing to put into something is what's convenient, or when I have energy, then good luck raising above the rest. It ain't going to work unless you're just a savant, and it'll work for you. But the rest of us, it will not work. That article basically just, it's in depth, but each of us have yearnings and each of us have different skill sets. And then like the market's constantly changing. So there's all kinds of different opportunities that the market's saying, yes, we want those skill sets. And so marrying the two, going back to feasibility with ideals, marrying the two between like, what do I care about? What makes me unique? What past experiences, what natural abilities, what personality, and how much of the way I view success and what I want comes from a first principles thinking. Tim Urban calls this like a chef versus a cook. A chef creates things from raw materials and thinks about things bottom up from first principles, whereas a cook follows recipes. And a lot of times in our thinking, going back to our childhood, how much of our thinking is a cook following recipes and instruction and just guidance from society and inertia or family or a friend or an experience that we've never really confronted and been able to deconstruct why that shaped us the way it did. For me, athletics, for a lot of athletes, it's athletics, coaches, and be able to think from first principles like a chef and take your past experiences and take your abilities and take what you know about the world and start to develop your own framework and your own basis for decision making and what you consider success yourself. Once you start getting some of these habits and some of these thoughts and some of these more, I call it the basis, but more your foundational way of thinking and beliefs to stand on, then you have like an accurate, good place to start from where you can kind of proceed into the world and actually pick a career that fits you.
Right. Yeah, that's so important. And you mentioned something on the front end of that is don't just pick the convenient things, because convenient things end up getting really crowded. And I would give myself this advice when I was 20 years old is don't just do the things everyone else is doing, because those things aren't going to let you get enabled to step on any higher rungs on the ladder. And maybe that's not even a good picture. I mean, most of the things we say on this podcast are being said for the first time out loud anyways. And I think that's part of the beauty of it. So if you're talking about your own experience so far, like what have been a couple of the things that have really popped to you that you never thought this would be like? If you never thought that this would be how this is?
Well, I'll start on the side that's a little bit, and I normally do this anyway. I kind of go towards hole proofing something or focusing on the negative side. I never thought that having a little bit of flexibility and money to put into something new would be so hard.
Okay.
So like, I never thought that getting to the stage I'm at now, where it's like I have time, skills, resources to go solve a problem in the world. I never realized how difficult it would be when you have the autonomy to choose. Like, what a blessing, what an amazing first world problem to have.
Right.
But when you're trying to pick something that's like just perfect, it can be very difficult and stressful. So I think like one of the things in hindsight that's most exciting is for me was coming across a problem with TeamSynced and just having this like hunger to just get something to work and not having to like think about motivation and just like getting after it and working. I think if you can get into a situation where motivation is high and you know a problem, like that's a really great place to be if you enjoy working, because there isn't a lot of contemplation and like some of that work I just mentioned that I would give to myself when I'm 22 to 24. There isn't that. You can just work on your business and solve the problem and get traction. Now, I think that's a nice thing to have. It's better if you can place traction, place hard work and motivation through the proper way of thinking. That way you're headed down the right track, because I think too often people just get lured by what can I make money in? What's feasible? Right. How can I go make a quick buck? And what's the quickest way from A to B? What's the least amount of work and risk to get there? And that's just not fulfilling. Everyone writes about it. It doesn't work. That framework of thinking doesn't work. It doesn't lead to what you think it'll lead to. Everyone says it, So it's like, okay, everyone's saying it, but yet that's still inherently what we do and where our thinking goes, because it's natural.
Right.
But something else too, Lee, I would, something a little less abstract and just to give people like my younger self is get experiences. Like, don't trade. Your time is so precious. Your learning experiences when you're young is such a valuable asset. Don't buy an expensive car, and if you're even pre-college, really consider how much debt you're going into and why, because college, car, and house, those three decisions, if you can just like mitigate those three decisions and make good ones, then your financial future is going to be bright. It's like 80% of personal finance is those three decisions. So if you can really just pick the experiences that allow you to learn a ton and develop as a person, Don't make a decision between, 40 and 60 grand or 50 and 75 grand, or even what seems to be marketable on a resume at the time. Go find really great experiences to learn and to develop yourself. And that by far is probably the universal advice I would give to everyone.
Yeah. So let me drill on that. So when I was 16, 17, and I heard someone say, go get experiences. And I would say, okay, no one will let me do anything though, because I'm 16 and 17, and I don't have any experience.
Sure.
And most of the things I touch, I don't do a better job. It's not better because I was here for it.
Sure.
So how do you ingratiate yourself into situations where people will give you experience for, to be quite honest, very little value in return?
Yeah. Well, okay. So first of all, I would start with going back to whoever wants to do the hard work, figure out what your yearnings
Mm-hmm.
to. Like I'm sales. I'm not a developer. I'm extrovert, not introvert. Like there's certain basic components I know about myself, so I can then channel those into the world appropriately. But if I was a developer and I was an introvert, then the experiences that I would prescribe for that person are different. So let's take those two as an example, like an extreme introvert, highly intellectual developer, and then like a mid, intellectual extrovert, high emotional intelligence sales guy. So no one controls how much value they give you in experiences. Money, yes. Opportunity, yes. But like the actual value you get from the experiences you undertake is solely on you. You control that, because we don't live in an era where there's no internet. We don't live in an era where there isn't a million sites for contract workers, how to learn things like Skillshare or Code Academy. There's unlimited resources in the US, first world countries with access to internet that eliminates all of our excuses, first of all.
Completely agree.
So now, if you're introvert and you're really intelligent and you kind of like computers and you played a little online poker in high school and you're not sure where to go, then go to Code Academy and start coding. Why? Because simple research for 30 minutes will tell you there's unlimited demand for developers of all sorts.
Mm-hmm.
To go push through it and get that experience through Code Academy, and pick a job that pays your bills, that gives you more time to go to Code Academy, become a developer, go to a dev school. And then within a year's time, you're getting paid twice as much as whatever job you were working while you were doing Code Academy. And now your career for income has increased like 1,000,000x, because there's unlimited options you can go, and you love your work, and you don't have to be on the road like all the sales guys. It's a beautiful thing for a programmer.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah. You reminded me of the road, and I was trying to forget about that, but here we are.
For guys like us, it's like you got to go to, okay, what are my natural things? Well, I can spam people on LinkedIn until I get a meeting. I can take someone to lunch because I have $20. Maybe we don't go to a nice lunch, but Chick-fil-A will do. And you use your skill sets to start to create experiences. And again, it's not convenient, but activity breeds activity. And if you go looking for it, like unlimited resources to go get valuable experiences when you're young, quickly cross things off the list. Drew Messer, a good friend in college, this always stuck with me. Yeah. He's like, it's not about like picking the right thing. It's about crossing things off the list. It's a process of elimination more so than it is a process of selection. And I think that's also true in many situations.
Yeah. I've spent, you're taking me, every time I talk to you, you remind me of things that I've been reading about and things I question about things I've thought in the past. And so I've spent a lot of time on selection theory and stuff like that recently. And there's some truth to checking things off the list, but for that to be fully true, you'd have to have a great list, right? And I don't think when you're young, or even in your first half of your career, your list isn't good because you don't know what to put on the list.
For sure.
You know what I'm saying? So that's just something I think about that, and I'll have to think about that more now. Thank you for giving me more work today, Tyler. Anything else that you'd mention that, like in this journey that, because you'll be on the podcast again. Like I tried very hard to get you in the office, but you've got a new baby, schedules permit. I'm on the road all the time. We know how this all goes, but we'll have you on eventually again, whether it's on WebEx or live. But is there anything that you would kind of point out in the conversation today that you think would be something that you'd love to impart to folks out there?
We talked a lot about lessons, I feel like, and principles, not so much like a, logical, just sequence of events and like what the experiences were like and how we went through different scenarios. But I think from a high level, it's like the thing that I appreciate most about my career this far and just the opportunities I've been afforded to work and meet people is let's just summarize those three things. I feel strongly about those is when you want to start a business, when you want to start a project, like if you want to sell something on Etsy, or you want to build an app, or you want to, start a service-based business in home services with lawn care and window washing, because there's something inside of you that says, I want freedom. So I need to go make money on my own terms so that I can set my own schedule. I don't want to be confined to just this job I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Or your motivation is whatever the motivation is. First, start with problems that you are familiar with. And if you say, I'm not familiar with any problems, I don't know. Well, then it's like, it's time to go find some, right? Like yes. It's never, you got to keep learning. And I'm in the same situation. It's like you become one-dimensional and you put your head down and you go home and you watch Netflix and you wake up and you have breakfast and go to work and go home and watch Netflix. It's like, you're not putting effort into things that will afford you the answers to this yearning you have of getting freedom. And so finding problems, or probably in the 10% of the time, opportunities that are amazing for people, that moves customers to buy things or to do things you want them to do. Yeah. And then, secondly, it has to be a decent idea where the unit economics make sense. Like if I went out and said, hey, I'm going to build amazing, ergonomically beautiful design chairs, and it costs me $1,000 to make them, and customers will pay me $250 per. Obviously, you run out of money pretty quickly, right? It doesn't work. So even a great idea where people will buy it for what you're selling for, you got to make sure the business is sound, whatever the model is. Doesn't have to be profitable right away. And the third thing is the motivation. Are you willing to press through the difficult times after the Etsy shop set up, after you ordered all your equipment? Are you going to actually then make stuff and deal with customer support questions and realize you only make $2.50, per necklace, and you got to sell a gajillion to quit your job? Are you going to figure out how to sell a gajillion, or are you going to quit? So the motivation internally to kind of pursue your idea and see it through is important, because most of the time what happens is your Etsy shop isn't really a good idea from the get-go, or it doesn't lend itself to
it's convenient and crowded, right? Or
but you learn
into those convenient and crowded spots and be the savant, like you said.
Yeah, but you learn too.
Exactly.
It's like the Etsy shop turns into like, this person, like custom events business, which turns into the third thing. And the third thing is what gets you to where, but because you started and you learned and you met people and you read, it sets you on a course.
Yes. The pivot.
For sure.
I love it.
Yeah, man.
Is that, I felt like I cut you off on that because you were going.
Oh, that's all right. I think the point got out there, and some people just have a hard time getting started. Yeah. They just have a hard time doing rudimentary work or work that's beneath them, or just doing the work, and they want to operate in ideas, or they want to hold out for something perfect, or they just don't want to be inconvenienced. Leaving the comfort's just whatever. And I don't know. That's just not the rubric that's worked for me. So I can't speak to other models. The model I'm speaking to is just like what my experience has been. And it's a fun journey. Hard, but fun.
So my last question for you is this, what do you think, because you mentioned this, that you used the word yearnings a couple times.
Yeah.
You use the word the chip on the shoulder kind of thing. What do you think happens to that, whatever that thing is, if it doesn't get addressed?
That's a really good question.
And this is the proof that this is an unscripted podcast, because we've said a few things and drawn blanks on questions back and forth.
Yeah.
I'll just tell you what I think, and then you tell me what you think. I think that the yearning or the chip can become either malignant and angry and resentful, or it can make you into essentially an indentured servant to just survival.
Yeah.
And so there's obviously a lot of different ways that can shake out, but that's like those are the archetypes of that.
Yeah.
In my mind. And I was wondering kind of like if you thought something like that, or if you think.
Yeah. I mean, so if we're going there, like I'll use myself as an example. Like the chip that I referenced earlier was an identity, something to do with identity. Like I wanted to go prove, I don't even know to who, that I can be successful and get back to like feeling a certain way that I had kind of seen myself at throughout high school, but then like injuries and lack of performance, whatever, in college kind of like took me off that podium. So it's like, I want to get back on that podium. That podium's nice. You know, it's warm up there. People,
it's warm up there. I like that.
I don't think, that chip was a really amazing motivator.
Yes.
Like it was like very effective. Like it got me up early. It kept me up late. And it allowed me to press through a lot of no's. And I didn't always consciously know, like that's what's like driving, not all, I don't ever think it's 100% of your motivation, but a really high degree. But I don't think that's like a healthy long-term chip. So you can still use chips. Like fortunately, like in my life, by God's grace, it works out for good, even through shortcomings, even through mistakes.
Right.
But I don't think it's healthy. Like to your point, I don't know exactly what it would have turned into, but you have to confront it eventually. And going back to that article, how to pick a career that actually fits you, those yearnings, like you have to kind of start to unwind and unpack why you think the way you do, why you have this chip, and you have to start to confront those things. And that can be difficult. But I think that process is so healthy because ultimately it isn't money that you want. Ultimately, the respect or inclusion that you're seeking, or whatever that chip is, that yearning, those two can go hand in hand. A lot of times, like that isn't actually what you want. It's what you think you want. And then once you get it, kind of like go read quotes by Jim Carrey or like anybody, they're like, oh, that's not the answer. So it makes sense to count the cost ahead of time and try to deal with some of these fundamental things,
right,
so that you can go have a very abundant and productive and happy entrepreneurial career or work career. Working is great. Having a job that pays you is amazing. You can still employ entrepreneurial skills through a job. Like being an entrepreneur, I mean, jobs are amazing, you know?
Absolutely.
So
yeah. And so when I point out those two archetypes, I wanted to make sure that like there are ways that it doesn't become the worst thing. It doesn't become the best thing. There's a full spectrum there. Like you said, like if you can come to terms and grapple with that need that you have, and you can turn it into something that works over time, that's a beautiful thing. And I think that's the way I think about it is I think that is you come to a point where you deal with that thing, and that's the process of maturity. And that's when you truly become an adult, I think. I'm still working it out.
For sure.
That's where my brain is on it right now.
That's well said.
So last thing is, you mentioned the article and you mentioned the Lean Startup book. Who wrote that article and what's it called, just so people can hear it right at the end here in a short.
I mean, Tim Urban.
Tim Urban.
Tim Urban, waitbutwhy.com. And then Eric Rice wrote the Lean Startup book. And I mean,
Eric Rice.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just trying to make sure we're saying it clearly, because if you go Google it and it's spelled wrong or something, I don't want people to feel like that's a bummer.
Yeah. And if I'm completely blanking on the author of this book, then sorry.
Well, yeah. Well, you do have the internet at your disposal, so I guess it's kind of on you. Gave you a carrot.
Yeah.
Anyways, Tyler, thanks so much for coming on. The sun's not even up yet here. I appreciate you being on this morning to do this. You've been one of the most influential characters in my career and life. I just want to say thanks for that. Thanks for being on the show. And we're going to do this again real soon. How's that?
Thanks, man. Enjoyed it. Appreciate it.